Hello and welcome back to Marie's Mindful Makes. I'm super happy to see you here today again. Today we're going to be talking about sewing, and particularly we are going to talk about things that I wish somebody had told me or was talking with me about when I first started to sew. I am entirely self-taught. In 2020 was when I really got into garment making, and there was a lot of trying and error and failure. And even if you know a lot, and even if you're going to take all of the things that I'm going to say to heart, there's still going to be a lot of failure and challenging, of course. But I still hope that you'll find some of the things that I say really helpful for your own sewing journey, whether you are at the very beginning of it or even already further advanced. I think there's always so much that we can learn. So let's grab your knitting, grab your crochet, grab your embroidery, grab whatever you want to grab something to drink, and let's get started. Today I'm wearing a new make, which is the Cielo top by Closet Core Patterns. The pattern comes as both a dress and a blouse version, but as you can see, I'm wearing the cropped top here. I think it makes for really nice silhouette with those dramatic lantern sleeves. I made mine from a rather heavyweight linen fabric in this fire truck red. I wasn't so sure about the color at first, but now I really love it. Now that you had a better look at this blouse, let's talk about it a little bit more. I really appreciate that Closet Core Patterns go up to a size 32. I've made the size 4 without any adjustments. So this is just how it is. This is the blouse in off-the-shelf sizing. I love, as I said, the big sleeves. I added a contrast facing in here from a leftover of a Liberty London very lightweight cotton batiste. Yes, that was a great success of a one-day sewing project. So as I was making this blouse, it had me think about how I thought it was out of my league when I got it. I got so intimidated, even though I don't think it actually was. And it had me thinking about there are a few things that I wish I knew when I started my own self-taught sewing journey, and that probably if I would have at least in theory know those things would have saved me a lot of emotional damage. I mean, you might be familiar with those moments. You're sitting there, seam ripper in one hand, cut fabric in the other hand, front of your sewing machine. You're swearing, you're crying, you're hating everything, starting with your sewing machine, ending with your entire existence. And I would say it doesn't have to be like that. Story time. I started to sew for, I would say, 2 reasons mainly. The first is really cool. And I wanted to be, I wanted to have that as a creative outlet. The second was that I had gotten so frustrated with off-the-shelf clothing. I had for years or forever taken skirts that I had purchased, especially tighter fitting skirts, to a tailor to take in at the waist. I had also at that time a few specific style choices, which made it even more difficult to find patterns that fit me. One of them being a rather retro, vintage inspired style, and the other being a commitment to only purchase, or to most of the time purchase, ethical fashion and sustainable choices. So I started to sew with a very specific vision and ambition in my head. Vision being, on the one hand, this super snug, beautiful, woolen, vintage-inspired, body-hugging pencil skirt, and then very intricate detailing all over the dresses. Way to start. So before you think, bro, I don't say that it's not good to have ambitious visions. I think it's really helpful to start that way. I think in the beginning, it would have been so helpful for me to have a better understanding that sewing consists of different skills and that it takes time to learn them all. So it's the one thing to sew a straight line. But then sewing a straight line is something very different to sewing a princess seam or even a curved seam like here with a sleeve though. And that's something that you first need to understand, that different seams require different kind of like how you bring them together. I had the very first dress that I made at the kind of kimono cut, where it means that the back piece of the bodice is a little bit longer than the front piece. What I did is I was like, oh no, I did a mistake cutting. And then I cut off, I shoved off the longer part in the back bodice. And then of course it didn't fit. And all like those kind of stupid things. Next thing, cutting is also something that actually you need to know like how to cut out. And then there's this whole big issue of fitting, which becomes so relevant when you are sewing clothes, especially if you have a very curvy body, which most of the time, I mean, a lot of women have very curvy bodies because we have a curvy bust and a curvy butt and all of these different things. And all of these things, there is so much to consider when it comes to fitting. There is so much to learn. And I think this is something when I understood that sewing and fitting are two different skills that are needed for one result. It was a big game changer for me. Just understanding it's like, oh, I don't suck at sewing per se. I just haven't acquired the right skill for fitting. It meant that I wasn't a terrible sewist. I just maybe wasn't the most prolific tailorist yet at the time. And that was fine. That's something I could live with. What I thought when I got so frustrated in the beginning, I thought that the style I had chosen for myself just didn't work with my skill. And I decided to compromise on my own fashion choice and be like, okay, well, means I probably can't be a vintage girly. I have to be like a kind of German öko, hipster kind of thing. And it actually helped me to advance my sewing. But a lot of the clothes that I made back then, I have since given away because they're just not my style. Staying true to your own style is possible at any sewing level. There are definitely patterns out there for the style you want, and I'm going to share a few of my favorite starting points with different styles in the next part. So the next lesson that I had was to prioritize the learning process and to particularly take advantage of indie pattern brands. Indie pattern makers, in my experience, really help you on that learning journey. The patterns are designed in a way to teach you about what it means to construct a nice, professional looking, durable garment. Very often there are video tutorials or helpful links, all of these things. Chances are that you are getting a response if you're emailing customer service in a small brand are much higher than when you're trying to send an email to a big brand. So all of these are reasons why I think in the beginning it is a very good idea to invest in a nice indie pattern. Even if it might be a little bit more expensive, don't do what I did. Don't buy all of the patterns and then don't sew any of it. But if you see a pattern that you like and you really follow the fabric instructions that pattern gives closely, it might be a really good starting point. There are so many things I learned by following the very elaborate instructions that are helpful to me in all of the projects that I'm sewing today. A few brands that I would like to highlight here because they've really helped me tremendously. The first brand that I would like to highlight is Twig and Tail. It is a pattern brand from New Zealand and they have a strong focus on sustainability, on nature. You can dress up the entire family in the same look. They have really nice embroidery patterns as well, and they're just super friendly and nice. Another pattern brand that I have sewn so much with but learned even more from is Gertie Hirsch's Charm Patterns brand. in 2020, just before the pandemic, Gertie started a Patreon account where you get access to a new pattern every month, which by itself is insane. And every of this pattern comes with a very detailed sewing instruction. And in the beginning, what I did was I just watched all of the videos, and it helped me so much. Just seeing somebody sew and understanding is like, that's what she's doing now, and now she's doing that. One example, in one video, she didn't even talk about it, she just did it. She matched darts, it's like those kind of darts. She matched them by using pins to see where on the other side the pin would come out. And that was, for me, it was a very little thing that happened at the side, but for me it was so helpful because I had struggled to this point to understand how the hell to match up my darts. So that's something that helped me so much, just looking at all of these different garments and how they're being constructed. For German sewists, I can very much recommend Lotte und Ludwig, which is a small indie brand, and there's so many nice patterns for the entire family. I have sewn for everyone in my family, almost everyone in my family, from their patterns. So definitely recommend if you are a German speaker. And then again, for English speakers, Sew Liberated, which is actually also in the snippets that you see. I am actually sewing a hinterland top, which is a Sew Liberated pattern. They're very tailored towards beginner sewists as well, but they have a wide variety of patterns and also a lot of different style directions. But I think the hinterland dress, for example, is a very, very good pattern to start your journey with if you're looking for a dress that can be styled in a lot of different ways and is simple. And then last but not least, I want to highlight the Peppermint magazine, which is a sewing and craft magazine that's published digitally. Quarterly, they have new sewing patterns coming out in collaborations with a lot of indie designers, which is also a really good way to find different indie designers. The Peppermint magazine has a lot of their sewing patterns are tailored towards beginners, I would say. They're not the most complex sewing patterns. And I actually had the very first sewing project that I did where I was like, yes, this is what I want to do. This is the kind of style I had been hoping to sew, with the Peppermint wrap skirt. So that's also a strong personal endorsement. And now that goes into the direction of the next thing I want to mention, which is to prioritize process over product. And of course, it's super important to know what you want to be doing, and you want to have a product that you're happy with. But if you are too hyper-focused on the product, it takes a lot of joy out of the entire process, because the moment your product fails, it feels like the entire process was a failure. So for me, it was a game changer when I managed to change that mindset. Part of the reason why I had been so focused on the project was also because I entered into my sewing journey with a very strong interest in a more sustainable lifestyle, just in general. And then it was heartbreaking to see just how much material I wasted, because I just didn't have the skill to get to the product that I wanted. And because I had chosen patterns where you had a lot of different small pattern pieces, it also meant that you couldn't really recycle or upcycle the fabric that I had wasted. And for me, at some point, I was like, okay, now I'm prioritizing the process and the learning, which also means that maybe I will accept that I will just buy the cheaper cotton in my local yarn store, and I will not go online to get this super fancy, organic, expensive, I don't know what, indie brand designer fabric. Yeah? So it was something for me which felt like a big compromise, but it also made it a lot easier to just say, okay, this is a learning process. And taking a lot of that stress out actually helped me to then also get better products in the end. And it's only practice that makes perfect, and you shouldn't practice from the highest standards possible. It's like, why put that pressure on yourself? Just in general, in life, why put that pressure on yourself? The lesson 5 is to never underestimate just how arbitrary sizing is. I mean, I understood very early in that the sizes that are being given by pattern brands are just as random as if you're going to a clothing store. So that was one thing where I was like, okay, I get it. Like, it's important to measure yourself to then get to, know which size you'll have to choose. What I didn't understand is that all of the patterns, you always have the body measurement chart and then you have the final measurement chart. And in the final measurements, the ease of the pattern, the intended ease, is already built in. And for me, in the beginning, I was very often drowning in clothes. At least that's how it felt to me. And I'm sure that it would have felt very differently to people who like a wider cut. But I, as a person, my own fit preference is to have tight and snug clothes. So this, for example, is a great example, this blouse, because I fall on a size 6 on the size measurement chart, but I actually made a size 4 because I know that I personally don't really love a too oversized silhouette. It's a good fit, and that's because I understood my own fit preferences and how that translates into ease. And then also understanding just how much bodies change. And a lot of designers often tell you, well, if you're measuring yourself, wear the underwear you're going to be wearing with it. This, for example, is a blouse where the bust darts sit a little bit higher. And I saw this with the intention of wearing a bra underneath. So the bust sits a little bit higher than if I wouldn't wear a bra, because, well, that's just how it is. Maybe you're super chill when you're sewing and you're going braless and everything's free to hang wherever it wants to hang, and you're measuring yourself and the bust circumference might be a little bit lower, but then when you actually want to wear out that tight dress, you're wearing it with underwear, and then suddenly it doesn't fit because now the proportions are very different and the measurement actually might change. So that's something that's important to consider, but then also considering just how much your own body changes. And I didn't realize it for the longest time that some of the clothes that I was making didn't fit me just because my measurements had changed so drastically throughout the day. And I mean, sometimes if I'm making a really tight pencil dress, that's nothing that I'm going to wear when I'm bloated. So yeah, I need to consider that. But then with other things, I was like, that is why elasticated waists are so helpful. But instead of thinking that, one, your measuring skills suck, or two, your body sucks because it changes, it's just good to understand that to get a better fit of your clothing and to create clothes that actually work well with you. The next lesson, and I touched upon this before, was to really understand fabric. And of course, the one thing is to understand fabric and how it translates into a finished garment. But what was for me, the more important lesson is to actually make sure that the muslin fabric for your test piece relates to the actual fabric of the finished product. And I have a very terrible story from the beginning of my sewing. I wanted to make myself a saran dress by Tilly and the Buttons, and I had chosen some lightweight cotton, probably an old bedsheet, for my muslin piece, and I was sewing it up and it worked well and the fit was quite nice, and I had to tweak it a little bit, but I was very happy. It was like one of the first pieces where I really changed the fit a little bit. I was so proud, and I was so proud and so certain that this dress would have a perfect fit that I went into a full embroidery of the waistband of that dress, and I spent hours and hours embroidering the waistband with the leaves, and it was so beautiful. And I make the final thing and it does not fit at all. The fit was terribly off, because what I hadn't considered is that the fabric was a heavyweight linen that didn't work for the dress to begin with, but then also with the measurements, it didn't have the same kind of flow. It was so stiff. It was heartbreaking. After that, I was like, I'm never going to sew again, ever. I changed it later into a skirt, so then that worked. Oh yeah, I also, not me, my husband also hand covered every single button of that dress. It was so much work that went into the dress, and then it didn't fit. It was so frustrating. Oh my God. Now, final lesson, the importance of seam finishing. So now all of the other things were a lot more philosophical, general mindset, general approach. Seam finishing seems oddly technical at this point, but it is something that is so important. And in the beginning of my sewing journey, I did not understand that seam finishing is not for purely aesthetic reasons. When I started to sew, most of the projects I made were from linen fabric. And linen has the tendency to fray very strongly. But what I thought in the beginning is that my dresses break because I suck at sewing. And it took quite some time until I realized that it wasn't actually the seams that were ripping open, but the fabric was fraying all the way up to the seam so that it would then open up, especially in like areas like pockets and all of that. But it really took me some time to understand that it was because of that fraying and not because I did something wrong as I was sewing the dress. Today, I'm very pro pro seam finishing, like even with covered seam, I mean, depending on the fabric, of course, but with linen, I will finish every single seam. Most of the sewing machines have either an overlock stitch or a zigzag stitch. So that is something, it's a very easy way to sew over your edges and to finish them nice and clean. But I got pinking shears very early in because I also think, like, I think it looks cute. It's those kind of things that make sure that you can be happy with the garment that you've made for a really, really long time to come. And I mean, and that's what we're sewing for, right? I mean, unless the fit is off or the color doesn't work or you chose the wrong fabric. But if all of these things worked out well, and you have a garment that you love and that you enjoy, it's that technical detail throughout the sewing that will really make a great difference. And I think it's worth spending that time. Wow, that was a lot of talking about what I wish I knew when I started sewing. Over the years, a lot of things have accumulated, a lot of things that I have learned. I have come very far and I'm very proud of that process. And I'm sure you should be too. Let me know if there is something that I missed, but even more if there is something where you can relate. I would love to know how you experience your own sewing journey, no matter where you stand. Let me know down below in the comments. If you liked this video, make sure to like this video, hit that like button. And if you like this kind of content, I would be super happy if you wanted to subscribe to my channel. And I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.